Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to Sniper Elite V2, where today we are reviewing the game. But before we get into this, I want to plug my Discord server real quick. It's a great place to hang out with other Sniper Elite players, so check it out. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Before we get into the story, I must warn you that this part of the video contains spoilers. If you don't want this game spoiled, then skip ahead to the next chapter. Now let's get stuck in. Sniper Elite V2 is actually a reimagining of the original Sniper Elite. Sniper Elite V2 follows OSS operative Karl Fairburn in the final days of the Battle of Berlin. Karl's mission in Berlin is to assassinate multiple Nazi scientists defecting to the Red Army, and one such target is Dr. Gunther Kriedel. Karl assassinates Kriedel, who has documents showing the location of one of Germany's remaining V2 factories, where 3 more scientists are in hiding. Karl infiltrates the facility and finds no scientists, but finds out that a scientist he had been sent to kill, one Dr. Ephraim Schweiger, is trying to defect to the Americans. Karl saves Schweiger, who gets injured after a lengthy firefight. Schweiger, in his dying moments, tells Karl of Tabun. Karl finds out that Tabun is in fact a nerve agent that is being loaded into V2 rockets, which will be fired at London by the Soviets, who will then frame the Nazis for the attack. Karl finds the location of the launch site and infiltrates it, destroying the facility. Finally, Karl kills the mastermind behind the whole plan, a Dr. Wolf, who is escaping to the Soviet Union, by shooting him from atop the Brandenburg Gate. The story itself is actually quite good, and not just for a Sniper Elite game. The plot twists and turns, and although it falls back onto the good old-fashioned Wolf/Vahlen/Borm/Mola was one step ahead of us this whole time trope that all Sniper Elite games try to do, I can let it off once, simply because at this point in time, it wasn't flogging a dead horse. Throughout the whole game, the overarching enemy is not the Nazis, who are all but defeated by now, but instead is the Soviets, and this is really very cool. It is a Cold War shooter, despite what some say, and it does well at this. There are a few issues, however. If you've played other Sniper Elite games before this will feel like a retread of all the other Sniper Elite games, except now with Soviets in it. You know, a villain that you only see once is killed after his superweapon that threatens to turn the tide of the war is destroyed by Karl. The whole story is based on the findings you make in a seemingly routine mission. You meet a contact, who then dies. That is the format of every game in the series, and whilst that wasn't the case then, it certainly is now, and it makes Sniper Elite V2's story boring if you've played other games in the series beforehand. And if you haven't, and you think you're being smart by playing this one first, you shouldn't. All the stories are crap, and you should buy Sniper Elite 4 before you buy this. Don't worry about it not being in order, it's fine. The characters are paper thin too, worse than any other game in the series. The only 2 characters who actually do anything other than being killed by Karl is Schweiger, who is in a small segment from one mission, he hardly speaks at all, and then he's selfish enough to die of several gunshot wounds. And then Karl himself, who seems to have been designed as the strong, silent type, which works in some games, but these games typically have a colourful cast of supporting characters. Take Halo for example. Master Chief hardly says anything, but that's because Cortana does all the speaking for him. She's a good character, and he is a strong, silent dude. Karl doesn't have a Cortana, he doesn't have an accompanying operative, like they'd underutilise with Grauer and then Harry Hawker later on in the series. He doesn't have a Resistance member, like they'd find with Sophia Di Rocco and Charlie and Marie later in the series. He sits there and he doesn't speak, and that's why the characters are so bad, because the only character who appears in multiple missions is basically a mute. And because this is a game and not a film, he doesn't display non-verbal character traits because that's all down to the player. He's got the charisma of a cardboard cutout of himself. The campaign consists of 10 missions and a playable prologue, which is about half the length of a proper mission. This is substantially more than the modern games in the series, which tend to have around 8 missions each. This is because Sniper Elite V2 uses far more linear level design than other titles in the series. Despite being very linear, these levels aren't as linear as you might initially realise. Oftentimes, side streets, alleys and wrecked buildings can be explored and traversed in order to reach a superior vantage point that will allow you to more easily dispose of enemies. These levels are really good for what they are, and I wouldn't say that this game's level design has aged at all, because they're fundamentally good designs that don't try and compete with the levels from later games. Unlike Sniper Elite 4 and 5, which are almost constantly auto-saving, Sniper Elite 3, which relies almost entirely on manual saves, Sniper Elite V2's linear level structure allows for predetermined checkpoints to save your progress. These checkpoints are quite far spaced apart, so it can sometimes be frustrating if you lose a ton of progress because you've been sent back a long way after you died or failed the mission. On the regular linear missions, this is at worst annoying. However, the game's DLC missions are much more non-linear and open, much more similar to the levels of Sniper Elite 4 and 5, and here you can make absolutely massive progress in a mission only to die and be sent back really far, sometimes even back to the very beginning of the mission. Generally it isn't an issue, but it can happen, and when it does you will probably just rage quit. The encounters are well designed, and combined with the great level designs, this is a properly fun game to play through, with some of my favourite segments in the entire series being things like the first part of Tiergarten Flak Tower, and the defence of the Kaiser Friedrich Museum. Kill tally is what survival used to be called back in the Dark Ages. Kill tally in Sniper Elite V2 is a bare bones affair consisting of you surviving against hordes of enemies. It is worth noting that this is actually quite a difficult mode, so if you want a proper challenge and you're a veteran survival player, this might be for you. But it is truly pared back compared to the survivals of later games in the series. There are no command posts, although there are more maps than I expected, some of which also have Panzerfausts on them, a weapon I didn't even realise was in the game. This is a borderline acceptable mode, but it is quite featureless and you have to take it at face value. What you see is what you get. I would have liked to have reviewed the multiplayer mode, but there were no multiplayer games about when I tried to play. I've never seen one and this video was made too short notice to organise one, but I assume that the multiplayer in this game will not be great. Sniper Elite multiplayer in my opinion never has been, and with the ineffectiveness of all weapons bar the rifles, I'd expect this game's multiplayer to be Exhibit A in the Camping is a Legitimate Strategy Museum. Sniper Elite V2's weapon roster consists of the usual World War II fare, with MP40s, PPSHs and Mosindigants thrown about like they're going out of fashion. However, there are several interesting points. The Welrod was an uncommon weapon for a video game at the time, and although it's common as muck now thanks to every succeeding Sniper Elite game, this was an innovative decision at the time. The substitution of the bolt-action Kar98K in German hands in favour of the semi-auto G43 is a great choice, as it helps differentiate the Nazis and the Reds. The rest of the default roster is fairly dull, but with DLC things start getting interesting. More uncommon guns, such as the Bleskowicz and the Arasaka, are really nice to see, with the rest of the DLC providing staple Second World War favourites like the Garand and the MP44. The weapons sandbox is where things begin to come undone, however. The sniper rifles are very good, but the submachine guns are as useful as a chocolate teapot and the pistols are an absolute mess. I brought this up in my ranking every pistol video for Sniper Elite V2, but the game's emphasis on stealth means that the Welrod, being the game's only silenced weapon, is a required pick, which means that the rest of the pistols, which are actually very, very good, never get to see proper use. It's a shame, as the Welrod is so unutterably bothersome and you have to use it. To be fair, it'd take until Sniper Elite 4 before they got pistol balancing right, with the Sniper Elite 3 HDM eclipsing every other weapon, pistol or otherwise, in the game, but at least the HDM was overpowered. I'd much rather an overpowered weapon you want to take than an underpowered weapon that the nature of the game forces you to take. The way ammo is handled is also problematic. Ammo is not transferable across weapons of the same type like it was in 4 and 5, which means that you'll be forced into taking whatever the enemy is using, because that's all you'll find ammo for. Additionally, you can hardly carry any submachine gun ammunition, which wouldn't be so bad if you couldn't also carry 100 rounds of sniper rifle ammunition in reserve, which is ridiculous. Overall, the weapon roster is good, but the way the weapons were handled is not. It reeks of an era from before people knew how to make video games, which would have been all well and good in 1993, but this game came out in 2012. It has no excuses. Equipment is the usual stuff, before the equipment became plagued with redundant crap like the flint and steel, the shoe mine and the decoy. We have F1 grenades and steel hand grenades, the former having a short range and powerful explosion, and the latter having a long range and weak explosion. We get telemines and trip mines, neither of which can be defused once planted, the TNT and the rock. All simple stuff with no redundancy whatsoever, which is great to see. The campaign features two groups of enemies, the Nazis and the Soviets, with each one having different weapons and troops. The Soviets have a rapid-fire PPSH submachine gun and the slower Mosin Nagant rifles, whilst the Germans have the fast-firing G43s and steady, accurate MP40s. There doesn't seem to be a difference in actual AI, and if there is, it really isn't noticeable, which I feel is a missed opportunity, as this could have really helped the campaign. One of the reasons that COD World at War is so fondly remembered is that the Japanese and the Nazis, two factions you fought against, had really unique combat styles, with the Japanese setting up traps and banzai ambushes to offset their weaknesses in other areas, whereas the Germans would make use of armoured vehicles, rockets and snipers in order to back up concerted attacks by the rank and file. The existing Sniper Elite V2 AI is entirely suitable for the Germans, but it would have been nice to see some different behaviours for Soviets, who would maybe have more aggressive assault tactics compared to the current AI, who shoot mostly from cover. The actual AI is good, however. Enemies can throw grenades and assault your position, although they rarely do, preferring to fight you at range unless they're already behind you, which is good because ranged fighting encourages sniper rifle usage. Enemies from each side are split into infantrymen, who are useless, elites, who are tougher but still useless, officers, who are weaker and useless, and then snipers, who are literally invisible and also incredibly accurate. The sniper scope glint is almost non-existent in this game, which makes it properly hard. On their own, non-sniper enemies are mostly harmless, but when up close or in groups of 3 or more, they will overpower you. The enemies can also go prone, although non-snipers rarely do. I'd like them to have done it a little more often, but the fact they go prone at all is nice, as they couldn't do this in any other game in the series except for the original Sniper Elite, which doesn't count. Enemies can also use stationary MG42s, which are quite deadly. In terms of vehicles, the Opel Blitz is quite common, and most can be destroyed by shooting the cap on their fuel tank. It is worth noting that strangely some Opel Blitzes don't have the fuel filler cap on their tank and therefore can't be destroyed. The only other vehicle used by the enemies are the tanks, and each side gets their own, with the Germans getting the Tiger I and the Soviets getting the IS-2, which, for those of you who don't know, is like a T-34 that isn't cool. Both tanks can be easily destroyed by shooting their fuel caps, which are placed slightly differently depending on each tank, requiring different strategies for each one. Considering that this is the first game in the series, the lack of enemy variation is fine, and it isn't really noticed, seeing as you're fighting against two sides during the course of the game. Gameplay focuses heavily on sniping, which is exactly how it should be. The aim assist reticule is better in this game, it only fades in after a second or two in empty lung, which means that you have to be more conservative with your empty lung usage, especially seeing as empty lung is far less powerful here than it is in the new games. As stated previously, submachine guns are, to all intents and purposes, useless, which you could argue is to make you focus on sniping, laying traps and choosing your battles, but in reality I think it's just poor design. I absolutely do not want submachine guns to be as powerful as they are in Sniper Elite 5, where they're the best weapons in the game, but I do think they need to be better than this. 4 struck a good balance, this does not. Weapons are not accessed through a weapon wheel, like every other game in the series, but they are accessed with the D-pad, with left D-pad being your rifle, right swapping between your submachine gun and pistol, and then up and down cycling equipment. In keeping with the popular trends of the 2012 shooter scene, there is no health bar, a feature that has been in every game including the original Sniper Elite. This actually works well with the linear design this game has. Because you have fewer options when it comes to using stealth or flanking, you do take much more fire, and the regenerating health is useful for that. It also helps declutter the somewhat clunky equipment selection, as you don't have to have medkits or bandages. Movement includes running, limited sprinting, crouching, crawling and climbing, the mechanics of which would remain pretty much unchanged until Sniper Elite 4. Crouch walking does increase your heart rate just as much as regular walking does, which means that you will have to stop for a second to catch your breath before engaging enemies, which is fine as it gives you time to tag people with your binoculars. The gunplay is fairly woeful. Rifles are borderline acceptable for 2012, although they lack character. Pistols are the same, but submachine guns are abysmal, partly due to the inaccuracy, but mostly down to the massive amount of reticule bloom compared to actual recoil, which is precisely the wrong way around when it comes to doing things. The DLC for this game includes the Kill Hitler pack, which includes the Kill Hitler mission, the first of its kind in a Sniper Elite game, and definitely the hardest Kill Hitler we've ever had. The pack also includes the SVT, which is a capable semi-automatic rifle designed with shorter range engagements in mind, and the Kar98K, a powerful bolt-action rifle with the highest zoom in the game. Personally, the Kar98 is my favourite rifle in this game, alongside the Type 99, and the Kill Hitler mission, whilst nothing compared with what would follow, is a must-play for fans of the series. The next DLC pack is Saint-Pierre, which includes the Saint-Pierre level, an assassination level with really good sniping action, and one I'd highly recommend. It also includes the M1 Garand, which is the best semi-auto in the game, and the Blythkowicz, which is a rapid-fire submachine gun with poor accuracy but high damage, and the TT-33, which is an accurate, fast-firing pistol. The next pack is the Landwehrkanal pack, which includes the Landwehrkanal, which in my opinion is perhaps the best assassination mission we've ever got in the entire series, if you ignore Target Führer. We also get the Type 99, which is one of the very best rifles in the game, the Enfield, the high-capacity bolt-action, and the MP44, which is a longer-range submachine gun. The final pack is the Neudorf Outpost pack, which contains the Neudorf Outpost mission, which is my favourite DLC mission in this game, and it feels just like a modern Sniper Elite level. We also get the M1 Carbine, a rapid-fire close-quarters semi-auto, and the Webley, the best pistol in the game. It's worth noting that Sniper Elite V2 Remastered comes with all the DLCs, so you'll only have to worry about this if you're buying the original Sniper Elite V2. Overall, Sniper Elite V2 is more than the sum of its parts. It's heavily flawed, the guns are as balanced as an I-400 submarine, with most being hardly any fun to use, the enemies are identikit copy-pasted toy soldiers, and the non-campaign modes are hardly worth playing, and the writing isn't even at GCSE level, but it isn't all that bad. The levels are incredibly well designed and the encounters are great, which is the most important thing in a Sniper Elite game. Sniper Elite 5 had this the other way around, where everything except for the level design was amazing, and look at how people treat that game. That shows you the importance of good level design in a Sniper Elite game, and that is where this game hits the nail on the head. So, should you buy it? If you're a die-hard Sniper Elite fan, you should. If you're only just getting into the series, buy Sniper Elite 4 first, or if you already own that, buy either one of the other games. This is good fun, but it is a campaign, there isn't anything else to do. But what a campaign it is. Thank you everyone for watching the video. Remember to like, subscribe and comment, it costs you nothing and it's a great way to help out the channel. Stay safe and goodbye.